Happy Thanksgiving. We're good to go. All right. Happy Thanksgiving. We are here, and every year on this particular week, you all don't necessarily know it. I know it every year, but this is a church holiday too. But it's not nearly as popular as Christmas and Easter. But do you know what next week begins? Advent begins next week. It's December 1st next Sunday. And we are heading into Advent, which means in the church year starts at Advent. It starts with Jesus as a baby and progressing as he is growing and growing. So this makes this Sunday, every year, the Sunday before the first Sunday of Advent, it is the last Sunday of the year. And the last Sunday of the year, now you're not going to go to Hallmark and be able to get a card for this at all. No money to be made here. They are expensive, aren't they, those Hallmark cards? Anyway, this last Sunday is called Christ the King Sunday. Do you know why it's named that? And this is really beautiful for me. It's really beautiful for me because I get to do life with you all the time, year after year after year. This signifies that we have gone through another year as a church, and we've told the story of Jesus. And we tell it again and again and again. If you're an old Baptist, you would know the song, "Tell me the story of Jesus," or "I love to tell the story of Jesus and his love." We tell it every year. And next year, we're going to begin with him as a baby. And we are going to grow with him as a baby. And then we'll work through his baptism and his temptation and his life here on earth. We'll do Easter and Passion together. And we will do his death and his resurrection. And then we'll do his ascension. And then we'll do Pentecost. And then we'll do this ordinary time we've been in. And the reason this is here at the end of the year is just as it was last year, and just as it is this year. At the end of our years, at the end of your year, and we are heading toward the end of our year this year, and I don't know what has all happened in your year and in your life. Some of it you wish hadn't happened. Some of it might have been the best year of your life. Some of it you're reminded of things you don't want to be reminded of. Some of it has been fresh beginnings of something new. But at the end of every year, and in the midst of your stories, and in the midst of your stories in this year that we've gone around, this year, last year, and next year will all end. And he is still the King. And that's for our comfort. And that's for our joy. And that's for our peace. He is the King. This is Christ the King Sunday because it's the end. And we always are reminded. In the middle of it, I find it is interesting that at least every 4 years in this cycle, we are being reminded of this even in our own cultural climate, that he's the King. He's always the King. And we're going to do that. So, who is this king? Because we don't like the word king. We do have that. Autumn points out, but you better like it because it's right over here. It is right over here. But, like 250 years ago, we fought a war because we hate kings, right? And so when we hear the word king, we think of kind of this domineering authority and those things. So, and you don't even necessarily want to hear that. I know I cringe. If someone tells me I don't look on it favorably, and I don't even think it would be meant favorably. It's like, oh, okay, you're the king of Nature Coast. That's usually not a very positive thing to say, right? There's an implication there that what you want gets done, and nobody else gets any word, nobody else gets any say, because that's just what kings do. Well, unless you're the big king. But it's also true of him. But I think that's where the twist is going to come. So Jesus is probably the king that we all really don't want, but he's the king that we need. He's the exact king that we need. And so as we end this year, he's a king like no other. And as we and you bring your lives here, we're just going to talk a little bit about who this one is. And before we even get to our text, I want to start with the very first book of the Bible, because we find out something about God in the very first book of the Bible, if you actually know, if you've been familiar with the story of Scripture. God created this paradise. The king created a paradise for his vassals in a garden, and the king had some rules, which weren't very many. Our God only had one rule in the garden, and it wasn't to eat of this particular tree. And of course, we, being good citizens of that kingdom, we broke his rule. And when we broke that rule, something happened. We felt something we had never felt before. We started to hide, and I would contend that we hide now. We're always hiding. We're hiding. I can be hiding this morning as I preach up here behind my words. We always hide. But we find out something about the king right away. Right away, when humanity falls and the king's rule is broken, we find something out about the heart of this king right away. First of all, we find out that this king has questions. Do you know the first words that this king ever uttered to humanity were these words? Where are you? Where are you? Now, in the garden, Adam and Eve had hid, and he wasn't saying like, oh, we're playing this game of hide and seek, and I cannot find you. He's saying, I have a question for you. Do you know where you are? Do you know what you've done? Do you know where you've landed? We find out that this king cares deeply about our hearts, and his first question is to probe our heart. And that can be scary when the king does it. But we're going to find out through all of Scripture that this king who loves us and pursues his heart. We just sang the goodness of God when he uttered the question to Adam and Eve, where are you? It is the first taste that we see of his goodness running after us. Do you know? Where are you? Where is your heart? This king always wants our heart. And he's the wonderful counselor. And he's after us. With that, we're going to head to our text. We're actually kind of the end of the Jesus story here. At the very end is last night. He's already had Last Supper with his disciples, been betrayed in the garden. He's on trial, and he is before Pilate before Pilate, or before he heads to the cross. And so we're just going to open it up. I'm going to hang out on each slide, and we're just going to work through the slides real quickly. So you can go to the next slide. So we're in the middle of the story. The story is this. The Jews, the religious leaders of the day, they wanted to kill Jesus. They had already made up their mind. They had already planned that. They had already had their trial. They had convicted him, but they have one problem. They aren't the true kings of that day. So in order to kill Jesus, to execute Jesus, because they're not the true kings, they are under the thumb of Rome, they need now Rome to sign off on it. So they send Jesus to Pilate, who is the Roman governor of that region, so that he will sign off on executing Jesus. So it's all kind of about, it's all a little power game going on here. And in this kind of way of the world, the Rome has the ultimate power. They get to decide his fate. The Jews, the religious leaders, have already convicted Jesus of his crimes, which were that he had blasphemed God. So Pilate has it. Pilate's got him. It's his trial now. And so he's putting, you have to always remind this, he's putting God on trial. That's not a great thing to do. But I don't know if Pilate realizes that, but he's putting God on trial. And Pilate has questions. And that's always a very interesting thing. If you got questions, I will just continue to say this over and over again. I think we should be curious about that, not just in our own lives, but when we have questions, certainly when we have questions toward God. The Gospels kind of give us a vision of Jesus, and even the Old Testament, Job's got questions for God. You know, God, why do you do this? And God he never answers the question. He just says, Job, who made you? Yeah, he says, who made you? I mean, he's like, you know, and he elicits, this is where I'm really going with it, because it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So God, you know, and he says, like, who made you? And then, you know, he goes through, like, were you there when the sun rises up? You know, he asks Job a litany of questions that Job has no idea what the answers are to. Do you know when mountain lions mate in the mountains? No, I don't, God. Okay. Then you're not the king, because I know those things. Now, that may seem hard, but he's pursuing Job in that. Christ is the same way. When you come and ask God a question, when you come and ask Christ a question, he's just not going to answer it. As much as it is, and we should be curious about that. Because he's going to always go after the heart. And I began to think about this week. You can take it away from even religious God and whatever. You could take it to religious world. But do you know every time I ask a question, just of anybody, or you ask a question. You know, when we kind of went to the non-denominational world, people had lots of questions. Like when you're in a denomination, things are kind of figured out for you, so you don't necessarily have to ask questions. It's just the way it is. If you want to go to that kind of church, you go to that kind of church. You come here, and then all of a sudden, you're asked, well, what do you believe about the Lord's Supper now? What do you believe about baptism? What do you believe about the gifts? What do you believe about drums and all of that in worship? What do you believe about women? I mean, you can go on and on and on about those things. But every time and I said this going on, and we kind of took a different approach even to those questions, but I began to realize this week that every time you ask a question because something's coming from your heart. So you may feel, and maybe you are right or wrong or whatever, you may want to know what we believe about baptism. And honestly, I really believe this. If you ask Jesus that question, he would turn around and ask you a question. Because he's going to want to know, when you ask the question, where did that question come from? What's in your heart? Why did you ask that question? I got to know. I got to know if I'm going to do it right. Oh, okay. Well, now you're confessing something. You're scared. You're scared. You're fearful. You're fearful that you might end up in the wrong church. You're fearful. He's always probing our hearts. And he does it with Pilate here. So Pilate does what he's supposed to do. He's got charges. They must have said, like, this dude thinks he's king. And that's how they're going to get him executed because, if he's king, Pilate needs to know about it because he shouldn't be king. He thought Herod's king, and now he got this insurrectionist. And if he's king, I need to put him under my thumb. So he starts with this question, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus doesn't answer the question, does he? You can go all the way back to the garden, and you can read the answer that Jesus flips it. So Jesus becomes the interrogator here. This is all beautiful because it's just setting up his kingship here. Is that your own idea? Jesus asked. Do you know what Jesus is really saying to Pilate? You just asked me that question. Where are you? Where are you? Where's your heart? I'm not answering your question. I want to know why you're asking me that. I mean, Pilate's hung here. Was it your own idea? Did you come up with it on your own? Or did someone else say, well, someone else did, and I got to keep him happy? Oh, so you're a people pleaser. We got your heart. You just confessed. Every question God asks us, and I even think every human question, always elicits a confession. I go to my own counseling. When my counselor asks me a question, sometimes, you get smart enough and you try to think, well, what's the right answer to that? I did that recently, and she said to me, I don't want that answer. I want your heart. Because she's eliciting a confession and answering that question. And that's where healing begins. Jesus says, where are you, Pilate? Is that your idea? That your idea? Or did others tell you to say it about me? Like, where are you in this? Why are you chasing me down? God's questions always elicit a confession. And we're going to find that at the end to be very, very beautiful. Very beautiful. Because once you confess, He's ready to be the king you've always needed. He just wants you to say it out loud. Pilate, he ain't having enough of that. So Pilate gets kind of irritated. Next slide. So Jesus says it is. Pilate deflects. Going to hide his heart. Like, am I a Jew? Not part of you peoples? Am I a Jew? All I know is your own religious people, like they handed you over to me. That's all I know. And like they say you're a king, but you must have done something really bad. That's why I'm chasing you down, because this is unnormal. It was unheard of for Jews to turn in Jews to Rome. They would never do that. That's betrayal. Why are they betraying Jesus? Why are they betraying one of their own? They hated Rome. They all stuck together as a pack. They hated anybody who even connected themselves to Rome. Ask Matthew the tax collector who collected the taxes for Rome how much he was loved. So Pilate's really confused, like, what's going on here? This never happens. This is a really odd situation. You must really be a bad guy because your own people have betrayed you. You must not be very good at their law. You must not be good at the law. Because this makes no sense to me, Pilate says. And also, from my understanding of a king, you say you're a king, but you're standing here all alone, looking kind of helpless to me. Last time I checked, if you were a king, where are your followers? Where are they? You don't look like a king to me at all. But it seems like they're saying you are. What's the deal here? Jesus not in the next slide, right here said, finally Pilate says, what have you done? What have you done that is so awful that I'm sitting here in an unheard of place where countrymen that hate us are betraying one of their own countrymen and trying to get me to kill one of you, which I would gladly do to all of you. He's probably thinking. And yet you're trying to get me to do it to one of your own. And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, and we played that game, I don't play the game, then you're right. I would have people here right now fighting to prevent my arrest by these leaders. Didn't that actually happen in the Garden of Gethsemane right before this? At least one of his followers decided to fight with a sword. His name was Peter. He chopped a dude's ear off, and Jesus was already telling us, my kingdom is not of this world, as he put the man's ear back on and healed it. But I am not that kind of king. I'm not the world's kind of king. I'm not the king of the hill kind of king. That's all we know. It's all we ever really engage. We learn it as kids. I mean, I grew up in Ohio, and whenever we got enough snow and the snow plows would come and pile the snow up, guess what we would do? One of us would get on top of that hill, and people would try to climb up, and you could throw them without hurting people. You could throw them down the hill, and you played king of the hill. He says, I'm not that kind of king. Isn't that what we do in the world in which we live? It's not with snow mountains. It's with real nations and real people. Jesus says, I'm not playing that kind of game. I am not that kind of king. Pilate thinks that he has them, and you can go to the next slide, and he says, you are a king then. You just said, my kingdom is not of this world. I got you. And Jesus doesn't budge. And honestly, I don't know why I had not seen this. This is like a great movie line. You know, Jesus is standing on trial in front of already accused of something, convicted to die by his own people, now awaiting the judgment of someone that can ultimately pull the trigger of killing him. And he is standing there being cryptic. We wish Jesus wouldn't be that way. We wish that when Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world, he would have said, here's what my kingdom is like. Let me explain it so that you understand it more. Jesus doesn't do any of that. He doesn't do any of that. Jesus is standing there facing death, already condemned by his people, about to be condemned by Rome. And he looks right at Pilate, and he says, I was born for this. This kingdom that I belong to, I was born for this very moment. Because at this very moment, all of the truth of all of the ages, of all of the time, is going to be made known to the world. I was born to testify. I was born for this moment. I was born for this time. For in this moment, the truth is going to be known. The truth is going to be known about humanity, and the truth is going to be known about me. And I am going to, in these next hours, testify to that truth. And everyone who is on the side of truth will hear my voice. Are you saying this to Pilate? You maybe get a hint about where I might be going there, but that's all cryptic too. Because what is your first thing you want to say after hearing these words? I was born from this moment. I came to testify of the truth, and everyone on the side of the truth listens to my voice. What is the one thing you're dying to know about what Jesus said? What is one thing you want explained to you given what Jesus said? What is truth? And guess who asked the question for humanity? Pilate. he immediately says, well, what is truth? And thankfully, Jesus gave a 10-minute sermon on it. He didn't. He said nothing. Never answered the question. He's the king that we need. He stood there. Silence. Do you know? And the truth immediately starts to come out because Pilate's stuck, okay? We know he didn't know what to do. He kind of wanted to wash his hands. His wife is certainly wanting to wash her hands because we know the rest of the story. But immediately when Jesus said nothing, what is truth? Pilate thinks, oh, I've got my out. At this time of year, I get to set someone free. And I really like to set this Jesus dude free. And I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to set him free. So there's this really bad human being, and his name is Barabbas. And these religious people, this group of people, they'll never choose Barabbas because, Barabbas, he is so wicked and evil, he more than likely has killed some of their own children, their own kids. Barabbas has certainly had killed Jews. He had killed their own people, probably some of their own children. I am going to offer someone who's killed your own child or Jesus to be set free. There's no way you're going to set someone free who's killed your own family. And what does humanity do? It chooses Barabbas. I came into the world to testify of the truth. I don't think that made any sense to Pilate. But in this moment and in this time, the truth is this, that Jesus came. Our wonderful counselor, our creator, the one who made every fabric of our being. God himself came, and in this moment, he is testifying to the truth that humanity killed God. God showed up, and we killed him. That's the truth. The one who breathed life into our soul, the one who made the stars and the heavens and the earth, he showed up. And the hard, nasty, difficult truth is that we killed God. And he finally elicited a confession from humanity that we will do anything in our power but have him as king. That's the confession of all of it. And when we confess that, he also says, oh, but I was born for this moment. I was born to be rejected by the very people I was created so that I could pour my love on them. I got them to confess, and now that they have confessed, here's also the truth. This night is the truth. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. He was born for that. From eternity past, slain before the foundations of the world, he was born to hear us say, we hate you. And when we said to him, to hell with you, God, he said, to heaven with you. That's the truth of it all. And that is his grace, and that is his mercy, and that is his love. Did you know the Old Testament name? I didn't even know this week, and I was reading some people that I know the Old Testament and are reading it, and then I did some research myself. Do you know what the name of God literally is in the Old Testament? Well, no, literally, mercy. It's mercy. The name of God means mercy. Anyone who trusts that his name is mercy hears his voice. And so on the cross, he will say, Father, forgive. And it was on this night that the truth of the matter is he was born for this night so that he could hand out his mercy, grace, and forgiveness and love for the world. That is the truth to testify. You know, when we hear the question, what is truth? This is the other ironic thing. We always think, well, it's a set of facts. What is the truth? Well, the truth is that this church is located in Homosassa Springs, Florida, on a certain whatever. I mean, that is true. Truth does exist in that way. But here's the irony. Pilate looked at him and said, what is truth? And the truth isn't any proposition. It's not a bunch of facts. The irony is that truth was standing in front of him in that moment. Just 4 chapters earlier in the book of John, what did Jesus say? I am the way. I am the truth. And I am the life. I came to testify about myself. And do you hear the voice of your shepherd pursuing you and calling you home? The epistle text was from the book of Revelation this week, and the book of Revelation opens up. You know what it says in the first 4 verses? That Jesus is the King of Kings. And right after it calls Jesus the King of all of the rulers of the nations, it says, this King came so to love and to free us. That's why he came. He's king of your life this year. He's king of your holidays. He's king of this week. He's king of your losses. He's king of your joys. He's king in your pain. But he's not the king that's just up there sovereign, like, okay, tough, whatever, deal with it. He's wanting you to confess that you need him. And then he's going to pour out his kindness, grace, and mercy and walk with you and not condemn you wherever you have landed. He's the king that we might not think we need, but he's the king that we need. So remember this week, as you head toward Thanksgiving, that the rumors of grace, forgiveness, and redemption are all true. Everything will be okay, even if your Thanksgiving is a disaster. He's the king. So I was prepping for this week. One of the things I heard, which is ironic, we're in the middle of a political hot button season, and we're all worried about this thing and that, and some people are happy, some people are sad or whatever. And I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about Christ the King Sunday, and someone was telling me, I don't know, it was a few years back, I was anxious about something or whatever, and the person asked him, so I'm going to ask you here this morning. It didn't really work around here in the first service because we have a name of a street, but we don't want to think about the name of the street. But the question that was asked of the guy is, did you think about Grover Cleveland last night? No, no one, I would be stunned, other than if you were on the road. No one in this room thought about Grover Cleveland last night. You don't know what his economic policy was. You don't know what his foreign policy was. Maybe Sandy might. She's a history teacher. I don't. She might have taught it to me, but I forgot it all. Anyway, I don't know anything about Grover Cleveland. The point that this guy was saying is he was asked, is Christ the King? And I don't know how long ago Grover Cleveland was our president. But 100 years from now, he's still going to be the king. And we won't really remember our presidents now. There'll be something else and something different and whatever. He's the king. He's the king. So when you're at Thanksgiving, the rumors of his grace and his love and forgiveness are all true. So that means you and I can eat with people who voted differently than us. It means that we can engage. It means that the person sitting across from us from the table is someone that Jesus died for. And that is the kind of king he is. He came to set us free. Oh, the goodness of God. Let's stand and close with the goodness of God. Happy Thanksgiving. There is pie to be eaten. Some of you came between services and you're hungry again, so please eat pie again. It's in the back. I love you guys. Happy Thanksgiving. 9:30, 11 o'clockers next week. 9:30. Anyway, go in peace. Amen.